One man, one dream led to the fundamental purpose of Kappa Alpha Psi being achievement.
Brothers, we are here because this is an important inflection point in American history. Our ancestors have done many things. They've come from slavery, through Reconstruction, through Jim Crow, various discrimination, but we are here.
And standing with that illustrious purpose, the brothers of the Fort Worth Alumni Chapter of Kappa Alpha Psi want to be a part of the solution that ends racial inequality and injustice. We stand with community and the nation as we seek justice for all of our fallen brothers and sisters that have had their lives ended by those that swore to protect and serve them. This call to action is to the community at large, as we are stronger together than we are apart.
I was 15 years old, sitting in my mother's 1988 two-tone blue Mercury Topaz. 6 white police officers pulled up, pulled me out of the car, slammed me on the hood of the car. I have the slit in my chin to this day. I'm 46 years old. They put the barrel of the gun to my head, and they told me that I fit the description of a car thief. It didn't matter that I had the keys. It didn't matter that I was 120 pounds. It didn't matter that I couldn't drive. I got a few degrees and a few letters, but I've learned it really doesn't matter in 2020, because if you cross the wrong person, you go from lawyer to suspect. If you cross the wrong person, they will assassinate your character. If you cross the wrong person, then they will find a way to get at you. Malicious prosecution is real. We, as the educated black men, we got to get in the game. We got to speak up. We can't be too afraid to lose our spot, our comfortable position, our big houses and our German cars. We got to speak up. Because if we don't speak up, it's not going to be any change, brothers.
Everyone has a role to play. Some fight with signs in the streets, and others fight verbally. But let's not forget to fight with phone calls and letters to our elected officials. Let's fight with our finances, and let's definitely not forget to fight at the polls. Where there is no justice, there can be no peace. And we must be willing to press forward until the senseless murders are stopped.
I grew up in the 50s and the 60s, man. I tell you what, you think it was rough now, man, you should have been back in that 50s, 60s where there wasn't no cameras, there wasn't no cell phones, you didn't have no word.
But there is hope. Because it does not stop with us. The next generation must be prepared to carry on the torch of equality. So we must be prepared to equip them with the necessary tools and educate them appropriately so that they are the generation that gets it right and finds a better way. The Brothers of Fort Worth Alumni are proud to be active partners within our community. We are doctors, lawyers, military vets, engineers, entrepreneurs, husbands, bankers, civil servants, executives, pastors, educators, brothers, and fathers. Individually, we all have unique perspectives. However, as a chapter, we understand the significance of unity and see the big picture from a bird's eye view. We represent the community, and we are prepared to walk side by side with our allies, our officers, and our elected officials in solidarity as we promote the narrative that Black Lives Matter.
And you know what? When I get around a bunch of brothers like y'all inspire the hell out of me. And I'm gonna tell you, that's another one of the best decisions I ever made to become a Kappa. All right?
Welcome, and thank you for joining us today for the very first session of KappaKonversations. We want to thank all of our Facebook friends for tuning in via Facebook Live platform today. And as I said, this is the first in a series of topics, and we want to conduct this as a town hall type forum. So I am requesting that the Facebook family please provide all of your questions via the Facebook Live platform and identify who the desired panelist is that you would like to have answer your questions. My name is Rashad Raynar, and I am a proud initiate of the Fort Worth Alumni Chapter of Kappa Alpha Psi, and I'm also known as the voice of DFW. We are all aware that these are unique and trying times regarding COVID and personal interactions. However, just know that Fort Worth alumni will continue to push forward with innovation. Our hand will forever be extended out to the community. Although we may not be able to physically touch you, just know that we are here to support and embrace the community virtually. And now, it brings me great pleasure to introduce a phenomenal man to you that will say a few words here shortly. He is none other than our current polemarch, Dr. Keon Anderson.
Thank you, Brother Raynar. On behalf of the Fort Worth Alumni Chapter of Kappa Alpha Psi Fraternity Incorporated, I would like to welcome everyone to our first Kappa Conversations. I hope our audience and our panelists gain value from this much needed dialogue. Kappa Alpha Psi was founded on the night of January 5th, 1911 on the campus of Indiana University in Bloomington, Indiana. At the time, African Americans on that campus made up less than 1% of the student population. Against much adversity, not only did our fraternity survive, but our fraternity thrived, with its fundamental purpose being achievement. The Fort Worth Alumni Chapter has been serving the city of Fort Worth since 1947. We mentor young boys between the ages of 12 and 18 through our signature Kappa League program. The Fort Worth Alumni Scholarship Foundation gives out two $6,000 scholarships to Black male high school seniors in Fort Worth ISD. These scholarships are given in perpetuity. We partner with the Community Food Bank. We're able to do a lot of great work in the community because of our outstanding members and through generous donations. One being from Bob Terrell, Fort Worth's first and only Black city manager. We're actively involved in the community, but we know activism and good deeds alone will not resolve the upheaval going on in our country today. It will take collaboration from everyone, from all ages, genders, religion, and perspective. It will take us all evaluating the root causes of the issues, coming up with solutions, and continuously improving. Brothers of Kappa Alpha Psi have always been in the forefront of civil and human rights movements. Members like Ralph Abernathy, Bill Russell, Arthur Ashe, Mark Lamont Hill, Colin Kaepernick, and many others have helped to tilt the scales of justice for the voiceless in our country. Our nation is experiencing a level of upheaval not seen or felt in generations. These issues have impacted all of us in different ways. We hope that these conversations today can trigger the start of real change in the city of Fort Worth and surrounding areas, the state of Texas, and perhaps the country. I want to sincerely thank all of our panelists for participating in this event. Now let's open up our minds and open up our hearts for great conversation. Thank you. I will now turn it back over to Brother Raynar.
Thank you very much, Dr. Anderson, for those inspiring words. We really appreciate that. And now I have the privilege to introduce our panel for today's discussion. First up, we have the City of Fort Worth Police Chief, Mr. Ed Krause. Chief Krause has been a part of the Fort Worth Police Department for 26 years. He was a 26-year vet. So thank you for joining us today. Next, we're going to have the City of Fort Worth Police Monitor, Ms. Kim Neal. She's responsible for leading the effort to finalize the model to be used for independent review of the Fort Worth Police Department. Next, we're going to have the City of Fort Worth City Manager David Cook. He's been with the city. He's been in this particular position since June 30th of 2014, and he manages the city's $1.6 billion budget. Next, on our communication, we were supposed to have chairman of the Learn to Live committee for Kappa Alpha Psi, Mr. Jimmy McMickle, but Jimmy had a conflict and he was unable to join us today. So we will have the national vice chair, Mr. Joseph Bryant. Mr. Bryant, thank you so very much for joining us, sir. And last and definitely not least, we have the Assistant Criminal District Attorney at Tarrant County Criminal District Attorney's Office, Mr. Ty Stimson. And so before we allow each of the panelists to address the Facebook family, I just wanted to go through a few ground rules really quickly. Let's see. This, as I said, this is a community forum. So we have questions that are flowing in, but please, if you have questions for the panelists, please type them in right now so we can make sure that the community has an opportunity to speak directly to the panelists as they are here today. And when you provide your questions, include who you would like to hear from on that particular question. We have a team that's reviewing all of the questions to ensure appropriate and effective communication. All questions will be reviewed and a sample will be selected. And so without further ado, we're going to have opening comments. Chief Krause, please address the Facebook family.
Thank you very much. I appreciate this opportunity. And I think you hit the nail on the head. These conversations are more important now than they've ever been in my policing career because of what's going on in the community. The Fort Worth Police Department is a department with 1,700 sworn officers. We have another 400 civilian staff that do and support positions like dispatchers, call takers, and administrative staff. We are divided into 3 different bureaus. The Patrol Bureau, which is the front-facing part of the department. When you have a 911 call and you need somebody to respond, it's the patrol officers that come out there. They're the ones in the uniform in the cars. We have a support bureau that handles a lot of the undercover work and detective work. And we have an administrative and finance bureau that keeps track of the personnel and the finances of the department. And I'm sorry, I've got construction going on at my house and it's been quiet for a while, but right when I unmuted, they started up again. So if you're getting some background noise, that's what that is.
Okay, thank you very much, Chief Krause. Next, we are going to have the city manager to please address the Facebook family.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. I'm David Cook, and thank you for having me join you tonight. Appreciate being on here, and Chief Krause, Kim Neal, and I will do our best to answer questions you might have and share what we know going on in the city. You know, what I'll say is, just as the chief mentioned, conversations now are more important than ever. And we have protests throughout the world, as everybody knows, because of the George Floyd murder or killing, however you want to describe it. I don't want to gloss over the George Floyd in any way. We've had our own issues in Fort Worth, as everybody may know. We had the arrest of Jacqueline Craig back in December 2016, and that led the creation to the Race and Culture Task Force, which worked and looked at a number of things across the city in a number of different areas, including criminal justice, transportation, housing, economic development, and education. It's in fact the work of the Race and Culture Task Force, again from the arrest of Jacqueline Craig, that led to the creation of Kim's position. Kim Neal's position as police monitor came out of a recommendation from the Race and Culture Task Force. We're also implementing other recommendations from the Race and Culture Task Force. We also had the horrible incident with Tatiana Jefferson back in October. And that incident led to the creation of a panel of experts from the law enforcement arena from around the country. And they started their work essentially just January of 2020, right before the pandemic. They've actually been at work doing research, looking at policies, and they actually started some community meetings before the pandemic came in March, mid-March of this year. But we've been looking at a number of things. We'd be glad to share those. The George Floyd incident just brings it more to the forefront and identifies, again, the need across the country to look at police reform as long as a number of things. But I look forward to answering questions everybody might have. Thank you for having us on here.
We definitely appreciate you for addressing the Facebook audience. And next, we're going to have the police monitor, Ms. Kim Neal.
Good afternoon, everybody. This is Kim Neal. I am the first Fort Worth police monitor. We have an office of a deputy police monitor and an administrative professional in our office currently. And we are working to start not just conversation, but collaboration with the community and the police department, as well as problem solving. All three very important concepts. And the way we're going to do that is we're going to be a voice for the citizens of Fort Worth. We will accept complaints from the citizens regarding the police department, and we will also accept commendations as it relates to the police department. We want to do effective problem solving by working directly with the citizens of Fort Worth, as well as the police department, through collaborations and through conversations in the community. And we also want to look at policies and procedures and the practices and training of the police department. Those are things that come out of our reviews, and ultimately by looking at all of that, we will be able to impact a systemic change across the police department and improve overall on the community and police relations in Fort Worth. Ultimately, our goal is just that, to improve the communications between the police and community members. We think that is most important. Fort Worth has a great community. Fort Worth has a great police department, and we're here to improve on those efforts. And most importantly, one of the key things that I hear citizens want, and we will definitely accomplish, is the data analysis portion of it. Looking at patterns, looking at concerns, and then taking all of those items and ultimately making changes and working with the chief and his staff and making changes in the police department so that encounters with police officers and accountability of the police department is most effective. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Ms. Neal, for addressing the Facebook family. Next, we're going to have Assistant District Attorney, Mr. Ty Stimpson.
Good afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity to participate in this important conversation. My name is Ty Stimpson. As mentioned, I'm Assistant Criminal District Attorney at the Tarrant County DA's office, where our elected district attorney is Sharon Wilson. Just a little bit about this conversation. Sharon Wilson was the first DA in Tarrant County to create a law enforcement incident team, which investigates all officer-involved shootings and in-custody deaths. And our office has done a good job of staying on top of all the changes that have come within the criminal justice system and doing our part to make sure that every citizen in Tarrant County is safe, but also that we hold everyone up to the law. So I just thank you again for this opportunity, and also, to be a part of this conversation. And I will add that I am a member of Kappa Alpha Psi Fraternity Incorporated, Xi Sigma chapter initiated at Baylor University.
Definitely appreciate you for addressing the Facebook family. And finally, we are going to have Brother Bryant to address the Facebook family as well.
Good evening, all. I bring you greetings from the great state of Delaware. I am a member of Kappa Alpha Psi Fraternity Incorporated and have been so for the past 45 years. My background is law enforcement. I recently retired as Director of Public Safety for Newcastle County, Delaware. I'm also a member of the National Organization of Black Law Enforcement Executives, also known as NOBLE. But some 4 years ago, both NOBLE and Kappa Alpha Psi teamed up to create a program we eventually entitled Learn to Live. And it's a program that came about as a result of so many crucial issues affecting young people in our country today, specifically African Americans. There has been an increasing number of tragic outcomes while encountering law enforcement. So the two organizations got together, put this program together, and we have traveled across the country. We've probably done well over 300, again, across the country. It's a 3-part program presentation. The first is a PowerPoint presentation called The Law in Your Community. And during that 15 or 20 minutes, we address law enforcement training, community policing, your rights as a citizen, as well as the rights of law enforcement officers, how to file complaint, and the do's and don'ts. And then we follow that up with some mock scenarios where we try to visually reinforce some of the things that we think young people should know and understand. After that, we have a question and answer segment. And that has proven to be probably the most powerful piece of this presentation, because so many young people have not had an opportunity to sit and have a conversation with a law enforcement officer under a non-stressful and a secure environment. So that's the program. We try to focus in on high school and college students, but we have presented to middle school children. Because of the pandemic, we have put it on hold, but as soon as humanly possible, we will get back out there and start traveling again across the country. And really the bottom line is to do everything in our power to help young people of color, get home the same way they left. Thank you.
I definitely appreciate you for addressing this. Excuse me, Brother Bryant. Ms. Neal, did you want to say something?
To Mr. Bryant, that I am also a member of NOBLE, and as well as a certified trainer of law in your community, and have done several of them. So I was happy to hear about their program. It's a wonderful program, and I definitely believe in it.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for those kind words. And so I want to thank all the panelists for your brief introductions. Really appreciate that. And now we are going to transition into the panel discussion portion. And so the next, the first question that you're going to hear, I would like Chief Krause and City Manager Cook to address it in whatever format you would like to do it, or whoever would like to speak to it, or if you would both like to speak to it, that's perfectly fine. Indeed, reform is a necessity as we seek to reflect and portray ourselves as adaptive organizations. As of recent, this issue has become extremely politicized. In light of the president's recent executive order on police reform, what additional measures are you seeking to enact? Moreover, how will these ultimately
lead to enhanced community relations?
I'd like to start if that's all right. You were right. This issue is becoming politicized with some folks, and some of the rhetoric isn't helping out there. You mentioned the president's executive order. So in many ways, I think a lot of us in the law enforcement community think it fell a little short. It's almost like it seemed like he was walking a line trying to appease the cops, but also recognize that there is a need for change. I think police reform can be guided at the federal level with things like commissions. You know, with President Obama's Task Force 21st Century Policing certainly gave us some guiding principles, but I think real reform has to happen between the police and the city and the community at the local level. I think that's where you get the substantive change. Some of the things that the executive order mentioned was tying federal funding to certification of the of police agencies based on state standards. So that's the Texas Commission on Law Enforcement governs the certification of police officers in Texas. So all officers in Texas are already TCOL certified. It's got to be more than that. In Fort Worth, we contracted with the Texas Police Chiefs Association a couple of years ago to have them review our policies and procedures, and became accredited through that agency. The president talked about a database of officers who have been fired or resigned in lieu of investigation for excessive force. I fully support that. I think what you see is the groups like the Major City Chiefs Association came out and said that's a good start, but there's more to be done. We don't necessarily just have to maintain files on officers that have been fired, but also for officers with sustained allegations of serious misconduct should be placed in that database as well. And that gives, big agencies like Fort Worth, Dallas, they do a pretty thorough background check on their candidates. Smaller agencies may not have the resources to do that. So if there's a national registry of these officers that have been terminated or had serious misconduct that they could just reach out to and get that information right away, I think that would be a benefit to all officers, all police departments, and all communities. One of the things that we're excited about with the executive order, because it's also been talked about in many other forums, is the emphasis on mental health. Funding the mental health profession so officers either have resources to take somebody to that's in mental crisis, or we have professionals to take that off of the police departments where that is no longer a function of police to handle. Police officers are not well trained in handling people in mental crisis. It was never our bailiwick. It's something that kind of got dumped on us when the funding for mental health resources went away on the federal level, and they needed somebody to pick up the slack. Since cops are on duty 24/7, we got tasked with that, and we're probably not the best people to do that. So there are opportunities to increase our officers' proficiency in that, but if we can actually put that in the hands of the professionals, that would be great. I'll stop there and let David weigh in if he wants to. I don't know, I didn't get the hook sign, but I don't want to go on and on.
No, I'll add a little bit to that. Can everybody hear me? Thumbs up. All right. So I think I'd start with, I do agree with you. I think it is getting politicized, and it's not just the executive order. You have a different proposal in the Senate and a different proposal in the House, and it doesn't look like those are going to get negotiated out anytime soon. The part I'd add to is I think what we need to see is more transparency. I think transparency's got to be a big part of that, and that's whether it's the records of police officers from a discipline standpoint or a complaint standpoint. But I do think there's got to be more transparency. And part of the transparency is the establishment of the police monitor position too, where citizens, if they have an issue or have a complaint with the police department, they don't feel comfortable taking that complaint to the police department, they can take it to the police monitor. And if they have questions about police interactions, then they could take that to the police monitor too. They don't have to depend on going through the police department to do that. So I think the transparency is important. The independence oversight is important, but I do think it's the community being involved with the police department, with the city government, with the police monitor, really with all the other departments that the city has, and to make sure that the neighborhoods are safe and their community is safe. There's much more to community safety than just the police department. It's street lights, it's sidewalks, it's recreation centers, and having things to do both before school and after school and all different times of the day. So, but I do want to go back to, I do think it's transparency, independence, and again, making sure that there's a conversation with the community on making sure that neighborhoods and the community is safe.
Thank you both. For that message. I really appreciate it. I can tell you this, Chief Krause, if you get the hook, it will not be from me, sir. So you do not have to worry about that. So let's direct this next question to either we can have this one go to Ms. Neal or Mr. Cook, however you guys want to address it. With the newly minted position that was created regarding the monitor, will you describe the scope, purpose, and goals of this position, as well as illustrate what measures have been instituted to ensure independence as well as objectivity from the Fort Worth Police Department?
Kim, you want me to start? Then I'll turn it over to you. That sounds like a plan. So again, coming out of the Race and Culture Task Force and the recommendations, it really was about independent oversight of police. And we thought the best way to do that, because there's different models throughout the United States, we thought the best model would be to hire a police monitor. Again, and the idea is we would have an entity that's part of the city manager's office, independent of the police department, that the community could interact with, and that would be able to look at use of force, discipline in the police department from an independent standpoint. Now, part of that conversation is also, should we have a civilian or citizens review board working with the police monitor? So people that represent the community working with the police monitor on this independent role. So when we hired Kim, and Kim's only been on board a number of months, and then we threw a pandemic on top of that, she is working diligently to get feedback from the community on what does the community think we need in that oversight function, in this conversation about what should a civilian or citizen review board look like. So Kim's been at work, again, just a few number of months in this 2020, but I'll let her share with you how she sees that rolling out in the next couple of months. Kim?
So one of the things that we're doing is right now we're in the process of doing community conversations. We're calling them community collaboration conversations. And we're talking to individuals that represent community groups throughout the city of Fort Worth. And we're narrowing it to two basic questions. And those questions are, how do you see the concept of civilian oversight for the city of Fort Worth? And then what can your organization do to improve community and police relations? And so we do those through a virtual conversation. We do about 2 or 3 a week for 1.5 to 2 hours. And we have done maybe about 3 or 4, and they have been very insightful. They have not been conversations where people or community members want to argue or, with elevated voices. They're really bringing a lot of information to the table. They really want to be part of the process. They really want to ensure that not just the police department, but my office is also transparent and accountable. And so those conversations will go on through till July. Each session has been a full session, a full house each and every time. And so from there, we're going to do, in July, we're going to do some surveys. And those surveys will be of community members as well as police department. And we will ask them exactly those 2 questions. And we will ask them what type of problem solving and community policing efforts would they like to see. The one thing that we strongly believe in is that if we do community policing and we do it through a collaboration of the police department and the community, the effectiveness of that can be great, because it not only allows community to feel like they are being treated equitably, but it also raises the cultural sensitivity of police officers in understanding exactly what the community is addressing and what the community is dealing with. And together, they're working together to solve problems in their very own communities. So everyone's invested. And then over time, what that creates in the long term and the immediate short term are better community relations, because it's creating dialogue around problem solving. And so out of those surveys, we hope to get to that point where we can put community and police at the table to talk about these issues. It's going to be, I think it's going to be phenomenal. I think that if we can just get our COVID-19 numbers down, it could be really phenomenal, because we can have a lot of people at the table at one time having those conversations. As far as the Civilian Review Board, we are moving forward with looking at that. But as we have these conversations, we're looking to see what the citizens, what the community members want as it relates to that. What type of authority that they want the Civilian Review Board to have, and what are the key issues that they want the Civilian Review Board to look at. I have received a lot of questions about independence, and I can tell you that I report to David Cook, and that has been an independent role in that. The key to any civilian oversight agency is whether officials, whether appointed or elected, feel like they can basically weigh in on decisions of an office like an office like civilian oversight, whether it's a police monitor's office or whether it's a different form of civilian oversight. And I can tell you that from an independence level, that David has allowed the police monitor's office to act independently and to be out there in the field, talking with police officers, talking with the chief, talking with the community, so that we can come up independently and unbiasedly with an ultimate answer for the community and an ultimate solution for the community. So at the end of the day, we're going to be the proactive leaders in the community, basically ensuring the accountability of the police department working alongside of the chief. And we know that at the end of this process that we're going to be working, we're going to have a phenomenal police department, and we're going to continue to ensure the sustainable measures are going forward.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. There was a lot of insightful information that was provided there. So we definitely appreciate that. Next, this next question is going to go to ADA Stimson. To prevent overcriminalization, does the Tarrant County District Attorney's Office have a written policy for dealing with non-violent allegations versus violent allegations? If so, what is that policy?
So we don't have a formal written policy on how we deal with non-violent offenses versus violent offenses, but I will highlight that since our elected DA Sharon Wilson has taken office, our deferred prosecution program has been revamped. Traditionally, prior to Sharon's administration, people of color weren't necessarily was getting access into this deferred prosecution program, and she revamped the program to where now you see more people of colors now being able to qualify for this diversion program and have an opportunity to have their records expunged immediately. I think, one thing that was a misconception about the DA's office is that we're out to seek convictions, and it's actually our job to seek justice and not conviction. And sometimes justice is dismissing cases and not prosecuting cases, and sometimes justice is pursuing cases to the fullest extent. But we take each case individually, and we don't view everything as one size fits all, because every case and every person has a different story. And so we always make sure that we don't pigeonhole ourselves or trap ourselves into just doing one thing for every type of case.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much for that. And now, Brother Brian, we're going to direct a question to you. Yes. As the excuse me, as the vice chairman for Kappa Alpha Psi's Learn to Live initiative, can you tell us a little bit more about it for people that just have not heard about it prior to this particular panel discussion? And how can Learn to Live be adapted to improve police and local community relations within the city of Fort Worth?
Let me first talk in terms of, I think, the effectiveness of this program. And I'm sure Kim can attest it and even add to it. But it's a program that once you, and we've done it all across the country. And most times when you walk in, initially, the kids are very reluctant to participate because it's a rather interactive type program. But once we work through the first law in your community piece, and then the scenarios, the kids are so much engaged that they walk away from that with a good understanding and appreciation for our conversation. Again, it's something that is not common, in that a lot of young Black kids in particular, it's rare that they have the opportunity just to have a normal conversation with a police officer. So that adds to it. The second part of your question, I think probably the most, we will only encourage, you can reach out to Kim, you can reach out to me, and I can share my information with you later on, where if you're interested in having us come to your town, your city, your church, your college, just reach out to us. And again, once this pandemic calms down, we will be there to provide this very meaningful program. Okay, I definitely appreciate that. And if I'm correct, you're going to have to step away due to an emergency, correct? Yes. Okay. Yes. Well, Brother Bryant, we definitely want to thank you for joining us and stepping in at the last second, answering the call. I know that we're going to get a lot of inquiries about the program that you guys are running there. So definitely look forward to hearing back from us and, bless you and your family during this time. Okay. Thank you for the invite. I wish I had a little more time to prepare for it. And Kim, we'll talk soon. Have a great night. Thank you again. Mm-hmm. Okay, so definitely want to just continue to move forward here. So we are having engagement on Facebook, and questions are coming in. I will pick the next question that has populated itself. This one is for Chief Krause. Chief Krause, there is a belief by many that the letter that you wrote to the community advising us that you would not file charges against protesters came only after the DA's office advised you that
it would not allocate resources to prosecuting cases they couldn't prove. First, did a conversation of this sort take place, and would have been appropriate to advise the community about it in the letter? So I guess okay, so did the conversation take place, and would it have been appropriate to include that in the letter that you provided?
Okay, so yes, we did have a conversation with the second charge at the DA's office about the charges that were filed for rioting. The conversation was not that they were not going to pursue the charges, that they actually advised that they would pursue the charges, but they needed more information from each of the officers involved as to what their specific role was in the arrest of each individual person that was arrested. That was one of the factors that I took into consideration, but the main consideration was these individuals were arrested for rioting. They did not commit any other offense. These were not the ones that threw objects at our officers. These were not the ones that damaged property there in the West 7th or downtown areas. Their only charge was that they were part of the group that after the assembly was declared unlawful, they failed to leave. After 8 days of peaceful protests following that, I decided it was probably appropriate to go ahead and reduce those or drop those charges and issue a letter to the individuals that were arrested that we would be doing so.
I definitely want to thank you for the clarity on that. Stepping right up and heading it, right on that's a challenge, and so we appreciate you for responding to that. This next question is going to be for ADA Stimson. It has been politically popular over the years for politicians to campaign on the promise that they will be tough on crime. When elected officials take the approach that they will hammer out crime, does that mean that our community becomes the nail?
Just to make sure that I'm understanding the question correctly, and I think you're saying when elected officials, they run on being tough on crime, who I guess in essence who gets prosecuted the hardest is in essence, is that fair to say? The question?
Well, that's my interpretation of it. These are just coming in.
Well, I think as I mentioned before, it's not anyone's job to seek crime. Our job is just to seek justice. And I think one thing we have done is to make sure that we're prosecuting cases based off individuals that have broken the law. There's a lot of things that we have done to make sure that people are, given all the opportunities. Not everybody deserves to go to prison. Some people are more appropriate for probation if the case and the facts determine it. And so I just think what our office does is that we don't make a hard stance that if a person is charged with possession of marijuana, they're going to get X, or if a person is charged with aggravated assault, their punishment is going to be Y. Every case is truly reviewed based off the facts of that particular case, and I know that's always been our office policy since Sharon Wilson has been the DA. And I don't know if that directly answers the question that was asked, but there's no targeting of any particular community, any particular ethnicity or demographics, individuals that we're going to make sure that we prosecute them harder. That's just not what our office does.
All right, thank you so very much for your response there. Let's see, we have another question. This is for Chief Krause. The question is, are you familiar with the 3 E's action plan? Equity, equality for everyone. It was implemented in 2017. Is it still being used?
All right. I had
did
trouble
you
unmuting myself.
I'm sorry, say it again.
I had trouble unmuting myself, but
Okay.
yes, I am familiar with the plan. It is not being used in the form that it was drafted in. We do still have regular contact with some of the ministers that were involved in the original 3E plan. we do have regular contact with the members of the BPOA, the Black Police Officers Association Board. So some aspects of it are still in play, but overall, the entire plan is not.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, appreciate that. This next question is for City Manager Cook. It says, if the outcry over the arrest of Jacqueline Craig in 2016 was the impetus for hiring a police monitor, why did it take over 3 years to actually fill that position?
Okay. Let me see if I can remember the timeline. The arrest occurred in December of 2016. And I think the council approved the establishment of the Race and Culture Task Force. It was in August or September of 2017. The Race and Culture Task Force worked, and Ty Stimpson can help me on this. Ty, you were on that Race and Culture Task Force. I think the Race and Culture Task Force operated for about 18 or so months, and we got the recommendations in December of 2018. Is that right, Ty? Give a thumbs up if that's right. Yeah. We went to work on those recommendations. We put the police monitor in the budget for fiscal year 2020, and actually started on the recruitment of police monitor before the budget had been finished. But so part of that was letting the work of the Race and Culture Task Force play out, make sure that the monitor position was approved as part of the upcoming budget. And then we hired Kim and brought her on board at that point in time.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Let's see, this next question we have is also for you, Mr. Cook. The question goes, when will the new meet and confer meetings be held, now that the city council meeting was delayed until the 4th of August to allow for community input?
So the council tabled the decision on the meet and confer, as you mentioned, till August 4th. Jay Chappa, who's our deputy city manager, I don't have it right in front of me, is prepared a schedule. I know we're planning virtual meetings in July to explain the process for meet and confer, to talk about what's in the current meet and confer agreement, and then to answer questions and get feedback from the public, the community, about meet and confer. So that'll occur in July and before we come back for the August 4th meeting. I can get specific dates out, but I don't have them available in front of me.
Okay, thank you very much. The next question will be for Chief Krause. Since the death of Tatiana Jefferson, what efforts, if any, have you taken to review or even reduce the use of deadly force, as well as use of excessive force against citizens?
So we have several things in place that deal with that have been in place before that and are still in place since. One of the things we did even prior to that, but really played a part in that, was how we relay information to the public in dealing with critical police incidents. So we had developed a plan that we would immediately release video if we have it, that describe or show a negative police interaction, dealing with, in custody death or a police shooting, that we would try to get that done just as quick as possible. And we actually started about this time last year with a different shooting. We were able to get that video out in 4 days. Another one we had out within 24 hours, and Miss Jefferson's we had out within just a few hours. Even though that was a really negative video for the police department, we thought it was important to put out videos, not only when they show our officers' actions were justified or maybe appropriate, but also when it shows that they clearly were not. So we hope that transparency that David mentioned earlier helps to build trust with the community. And it also informs our officers that there will not be a way that they can, hide behind a desire to keep a video tied up until court. It just seems like the right thing to do. The public gives the police the authority to act, the authority to use force, and we need to be able to be transparent when that happens.
Okay, thank you. Definitely appreciate that. This next question is directed to yourself again, Chief Krause and Mr. Cook. However you guys would like to address it. The city of Fort Worth has a multitude of tools and gadgets to deploy in response to almost any type of situation. Is it prudent to deploy a patrol officer to every single 911 call? How can we expand the employment of skilled professionals like the constables or the peace officers to further reduce the burden upon the police ranks? It's also stating that potentially social workers or mental health workers could be dispatched as opposed to officers as well. So however you guys would like to tag team this one.
Okay, well, I'd like to start and say that, you mentioned constables or peace officers, and just so everybody's clear, those are peace officers, just like Fort Worth peace officers or police officers. So they would be dispatched in uniform with the same gun belt, the same tools, a marked city vehicle that identifies them as peace officers. So that may not be the best alternative to sending a patrol officer. However, I cannot agree more with the need for dispatching calls that do not rise to the level of a police emergency to other entities. Social workers, mental health workers, I completely agree. That would be ideal. We were looking after the Tatiana Jefferson shooting at non-emergency response teams. Non-sworn individuals that work for the police department or possibly work for a different city department that respond to things such as welfare checks, minor accidents that aren't on the freeway, non-aggressive criminal calls even, that they could take a report and it could be followed up by a detective, parking violations, disturbances, loud music where there's not an immediate threat to anybody. All those are options that we can do. Unfortunately, as we were preparing budget packages for consideration to the city, we got hit with COVID-19, which impacted the city's budget to a huge amount of money. So now instead of getting a decision package that puts more of these individuals in employ with the police department, we now have to look at how do we take money from other programs that we have working in order to get that done. But that is something we are all in support of in the police department. Let's save the police officers to respond to the critical incidents that require a trained police officer to respond to.
Okay, Mr. Cook, do you have anything to add?
I would just support what the chief has shared. There are other departments around the country that use non-sworn personnel to respond to the incidents that the chief talked about. And that's something that we'll certainly look at. And if we can allocate resources in that direction, we'll certainly look at doing it.
Okay, thank you.
I'd just like to add one more thing. One of the opportunities we got based on the COVID-19 pandemic was we looked for opportunities, ways that we can respond to calls without sending an officer to the scene. And one of the pilot programs we started is a virtual response team where individuals can call in and they can interact much like we're doing now over a web-based format. With a uniformed police officer so they can report their crime, report their issue, get direction, get directed to resources, and it's handled all over the internet instead of sending an officer to the scene. And that's something we realized pretty early on during the pandemic that we would like to continue afterwards too. That gives us the opportunity to use injured officers who can't go out on the street and still use them in a policing fashion where they can contribute to society.
I think that's a great idea. This COVID pandemic is forcing everyone to be innovative and to think outside of the box. And I do believe that there are some great ideas that are being generated across all different platforms. So it's good to hear that. This next question we have is for you, Chief. Pretty popular here today. In the past year, what is the approximate percentage of officer firings or disciplinary actions that have been overturned due to the police union involvement?
So I'm not going to have those direct percentages in front of me, but I can characterize it in general terms. So the police union provides representation for officers that receive discipline. That's if they get a day off without pay, suspension, or greater, they have the right to petition their police union and set that case for arbitration. So most of them do take advantage of that. Most of them do want to have an arbitration whenever they get disciplined, especially when they get fired and try to get their job back. So I would tell you that most of those cases do go to arbitration in front of a hearing examiner. And then there are several that are returned to work by a hearing examiner who, you know, has a different opinion than the chief of police who determined to fire that person.
Okay, thank you. This next question will be for ADA Stimson. It's just a question that's coming in, interpreted to you to the best of your ability. Does the percentage of minorities arrested in Fort Worth match up against population distribution? And who tracks this?
So we at the DA's office, we don't keep up with arrests per each agency. I think that would be more of a question for the city of Fort Worth. We represent this whole entire Tarrant County and don't really get into the numbers, particularly for each city. I think, either Chief Krause or David, Mr. Cook, or someone else for the city may be able to better answer that question.
Okay, Chief Krause, Mr. Cook, Ms. Neal, anyone have any insight on that?
Yeah, I will tell you, the last time I looked was for 2019 arrest, and no, it is not does not reflect the demographics of the city. Both our victims and our arrestees are higher in some categories and lower in others. I know the percentage of African Americans, for instance, in Fort Worth is 17.7% population-wise, but they accounted for, I believe it was 30% of the victims of all crime in Fort Worth in 2019, and I want to say it was close to 40% of the arrestees for crime in Fort Worth.
Wow.
I think the Hispanics were, I think they were a little bit less than their citywide demographic.
Okay. How was that tracked? Who tracks that information?
Our research and planning department can pull that information. That's where I got it from.
Okay. All right, thank you. Let's see what's next. Okay, this next one is going to be for you again, Chief Krause. It states that it's an unfortunate situation when an incident occurs and it has been determined that an officer's body camera has either malfunctioned or has been turned off. This scenario is very sensitive within the African American community. Can you walk us through the procedure of wearing body cams, and please advise if there are any ramifications if the cameras are turned off, and if so, what are those ramifications?
Yeah, so we do have a policy that guides how officers are supposed to wear the body cameras and what interactions they have to turn them on. So if they turn them on, or if they fail to turn them on when they're supposed to, they can be disciplined for that. If they turn them off when they're supposed to have them on, they can be disciplined for that. We do have some instances where the body cameras, either are knocked off if there's a struggle, or that they are defective. Typically, the body cameras are checked at the beginning of the shift. If there's a problem, the officer alerts their sergeant. If they can get a replacement, they will get one then. Otherwise, they mark it on the worksheet that they don't have a working body camera that day. And that can help protect them if something occurs and they don't have body camera footage of that incident, because they did report it beforehand. But if they are not using the body camera when they're supposed to, they can be disciplined for it.
Okay, thank you. This next question is for Ms. Neal. Ms. Neal, you were advised that you report directly to Mr. Cook, but the question is, organizationally speaking, where is the police monitor's post situated?
Right now, I'm situated in the city manager's office, actually physically in the city manager's office.
Okay. All right, not a problem. Thank you. So let's see. Once again, we have the question for Chief Krause. The theory of over-policing versus under-policing has existed for decades, with statistics likely to support both sides. The reality is that sediments exist reflecting that most police are viewed as an occupying force in minority neighborhoods and viewed as welcome guests in affluent communities. As complex as this may sound, how has your policing strategy changed, if at all, to ensure balance is maintained?
Okay, so this is a problem that departments struggle with quite a bit. And like you said, there's data that on both sides that can say, you know, that there's statistics that can back it up on both sides. So what we typically do is we look at our crime, and especially our violent crime, each week. And yes, if there's a spike in violent crime, we will put additional resources in those neighborhoods to address it. What we used to do is we would flood an area with marked units and uniformed officers and do what was called a zero tolerance detail, in which basically if you were out there in a vehicle and you made a traffic violation, you would be stopped and ticketed. That's what the zero tolerance meant. It meant that nobody gets a break. And then if you had warrants, you would go to jail. And again, nobody got a break. It was zero tolerance. So when we could say, look, there was a crime spike, but this is how we responded, and these are the stats to back it up, that we were out there addressing this. What we found is that disaffects the people that live in that community to a great deal, and it harms them moving forward. You know, because now they have a ticket to pay off, or now they've got a entry at a jail booking, and it just wasn't the right thing to do. So what we started doing is looking at the actors that are committing the crime, and not necessarily the community as a whole where the crimes are committed. So research has told us that a very large percentage of crime is attributable to a very small percentage of actors. And if we can identify those individuals and take them off the streets, then crime will go down, and it doesn't disproportionately affect the entire community out there. Another tactic we did with the summer violent crime detail last year was we partnered with Texas DPS. And I'm sure you remember, if you live in the area, when DPS went into Dallas to help Dallas PD with their violent crime, they got a lot of pushback on that because they felt the DPS troopers were very heavy-handed. We partnered with their criminal investigations division and their analysts and did research on who was doing the crime and where it was occurring, and tried to be a little bit more surgical instead of just flooding the area with additional units and troopers. And then when we did team up with troopers, we teamed up one of our officers with one of the troopers. So they were policing in a manner that we want our community policed, the way our community wants us to police them. Not just having a bunch of troopers on the street writing a bunch of tickets. So those are some of the ways that we've tried to address crime spikes in certain areas, but not disaffect the area.
Okay, thank you. This next question, we're going to request Mr. Cook and Ms. Neal, however you guys would like to address it. It says police unions are able to support or endorse city council candidates. Judges are allowed to ask for campaign donations from lawyers that they may likely see in their courtrooms. Do you think this is a conflict of interest? And how do we address campaign finance reform on the local level?
Yeah, Kim, go ahead and answer that one. I'm just kidding. So what we learn, right, with the police unions or the fire unions is, as an entity, they are allowed to do that, right? They have a right to do that. They can endorse candidates. They can provide contributions to candidates. And, would I say there's probably a potential conflict of interest there? Sure. How do we change that? I'm not quite sure. I guess it would have to change some campaign finance or something. I'm not sure how to fix that issue because I do think it does create an apparent conflict every now and then.
Do you have anything to add on that, Kim?
I just want to say that despite the fact there is campaign finance, I have personal feelings about that, but since I'm speaking as a police monitor, I'm going to keep it that way. I think despite that fact, the fact of the matter is we still have concerns in the community. So the police unions can fund the candidates, the judges can be funded, but at the end of the day, we still are going to have issues that are going to come to fruition in the community, and we still need to address them. And so at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what the campaign finance laws are and what the donations are. We get to a situation like the unfortunate death of Mr. Floyd, and as you see across this country, legislative bodies who may have not been for, in my case, civilian oversight, are across the country, despite what police unions may have contributed to their campaigns, they are faced with the fact that they have to address the citizens and hold themselves and city officials, and including the police department and organizations like mine, accountable. And so it's an overreaching area that we're still going to have to address, despite the fact what the campaign finance laws are.
Okay, thank you for your input there. And this next question is going to be for you again, Ms. Neal. In your past positions, have you worked with agencies that have citizen review boards? Dallas has a citizen review board. Would you object to working with an independent citizen review board?
No, I don't object to it. In fact, where I came from before I was at Fort Worth, I had an independent review board. And it was a very effective independent review board. Like any type of board, we just want to always ensure that boards are unbiased, that they're not influenced in any way. And so that happens on independent civilian review boards. And so we constantly have to monitor that process if one is put in place. So I talk with civilian oversight professionals across the country. I'm in regular communications with both the Dallas and the Austin Police Monitor. And so I'm an advocate of citizen police review boards, but I also want them to be impartial and unbiased and objective, and not be one-sided. And so that's a very important concept, no matter what format we take.
Okay, thank you. This question goes to anyone. What is the status of the Violent Crimes Task Force?
I'm not sure exactly what the Violent Crimes Task Force is. There are a couple of them out there. FBI partnership has one. that they work with agencies throughout the area. Fort Worth has, a violent crime detail that we stood up just to deal with, spikes in violent crime, but it's not an ongoing detail.
Okay. Okay. All right. Thank you. I definitely appreciate you for your insight there. Let's see. This next question, it would be geared toward yourself, Chief, the city manager, or the city monitor. So however you guys would like to address this. What discussions, if any, have occurred with the local and county agencies to ensure that more effective communication and engagement occurs within our heavily populated minority communities to restore confidence and create a better Fort Worth and Tarrant County?
So in the police department, we're partnering with several different community partners. We partner with the ministers, we partner with schools, ISDs, nonprofits. One of the things we started doing at the end of last year, into the beginning of this year, were listening sessions out in the community. We had one out in East Division, we had one over in Como, we had one in Central Division. We decided at one of those meetings, we had a suggestion from a participant that we should be going into the schools and having these same listening sessions with the young men and women in the high schools, because they're having some negative impacts or negative interactions with the police officers. That made perfect sense to us. So we went to Young Men's Leadership Academy, and we were able to hear from several of those individuals about some of their contacts with the police, and we are encouraging them, tell us about your negative interactions or the negative interactions your friends or family have had, because we need to know what the issues are before we can fix them. Eastern Hills High School, we did the same thing. We're able to get a lot of good input from the young folks that we interacted with there. Unfortunately, COVID hit, and I'm sick and tired of the COVID excuse, but it turns out most of our meetings are what we're doing right here now. And as I believe it was Kim said earlier, I can't wait to get back to where we're actually sitting down with people, and it's hard to get a gauge of somebody's heart over the internet, and certainly easier to make personal connections when you're face to face.
Okay, thank you.
So I'll take the opportunity with that question to pick up on another recommendation from the Race and Culture Task Force. And that was to look at how we provide services and infrastructures in all parts of the community, and whether we're doing that with the focus on equity. And so one of the recommendations was also the creation of a diversity and inclusion department. We haven't talked anything about that today, but we've hired right lady, Christina Brooks, to be our diversity and inclusion director. And she's only been on board, I think, 7 months, right? So she's, again, a product of the Race and Culture Task Force, but her role is to work with all the departments and to look at services and infrastructure investment with an equity lens. And to give you an example, it'd be if we look at just street lights, do we provide street lights equitably across the city? And if street lights are out, are they out equitably across the city? Is our maintenance schedules equitable? Are the switching to streets, are our streets in the same condition in all areas of the city? And if not, why? Is our investment in streets done equitably? So what I'm offering is that we're going to look at service delivery, right? Not just in the police department, but in other departments of the city, and with an eye toward equity, and make sure our investments and our service delivery is done that way.
Okay. I am a huge proponent of diversity and inclusion, being incorporated normally in corporate America, but incorporating that into the police force. It just makes sense to me, right? And so I'm definitely happy to hear that is a part of the implementation that is hopefully going to breed the change that we're seeking. So thank you for that. Kim, did you want to say something or just move on?
I just wanted to reemphasize what I said earlier about the community policing efforts. Like the chief said, and like we've all said here, that, COVID-19 did put a damper on meeting face to face. But that's one of the things that we're trying to accomplish through our community collaborations, our virtual community collaborations. But we hope to get back out in the community so that we can have some of these conversations about collaboration, about accountability, about transparency, and about community policing, so that community members can feel like they have a voice and know that they have a voice in the process of community policing.
Okay, well, thank you. Definitely appreciate each one of your responses on that. Here's a question that comes in. I assume it would be for you, Chief. Is there implicit bias training that the officers are required to take?
Yes. So in 2016, we partnered with the National Initiative, which was a Department of Justice program under the Obama administration, in which they were seeking 6 cities to participate in this program. And this program, they had some research universities like John Jay University in New York, and they would look at policies, procedures, and training of the participating agencies. And in exchange, they would provide training and then follow up to see if that training made any difference in those communities. So we were selected as one of those participant cities. We provided the information, and in exchange, we got 3 rounds of procedural justice training, which was new for our department. We got implicit bias training, which was new to our department. We are starting a 2nd round of implicit bias training once the training academy opens back up to classes. And the city is, I believe the city is contracting with a trainer to train every employee. And I'm going to defer to David Cook to make sure that is on track. Thumbs up, sir. Okay, so yes, I'm correct in there. So yes, the implicit bias is part of the training. And just so you know, we also partnered with the Police Executive Research Forum, which is a national think tank on policing. And they came down and provided de-escalation training for every one of our officers. I believe it was 2018. And that was a new training for all of our officers too. Now implicit bias training and de-escalation training are requirements for state officers through TCOL and in many other states. And we were able to get a lot of that done prior to the mandates. So we have opened our department up a couple times. Mr. Cook mentioned the panel of national experts that are reviewing policies and procedures now. We want to be transparent. We want to actually find a way to make our department better by strengthening our policies, not just the policies, but you have to follow that up with training. And then you have to add the accountability piece on the back end, discipline for not following that. And that's how you get culture change in a department. And unfortunately, you get a big department, culture change doesn't happen in a minute. It takes a while.
Okay, this next question is for Mr. Cook. The question was, are you aware of who Bob Terrell was and the initiative that he implemented? How are they, how are they still being supported if they are still being supported?
Well, I did know Bob Terrell, and when you mention his name, it just makes me smile. Because actually, when I spent time with him, I actually had a lot of fun. I'm not completely aware of the initiative that is being asked about.
Okay, there were no specifics that were by, so I'm not sure, but it was just something that they were curious about. If you were aware of anything that he was working on that's still currently, in play. So okay, not a problem. All right, and so what we'll do, we are running up on time here, so I will ask the final question here, and the final question is going to be for everyone. please define what success would look like to you regarding policing and community engagement. We can start with you, Chief.
The success for me, I'm going to look at it in a couple different lenses, or through a couple different lenses. Within my department, success for me is officers are buying in 100% into the direction the administration wants us to go. And that is holding ourselves, the police department, accountable to the community we serve. Changing from a warrior mindset to a guardian mindset, and then to a servant leadership role within the community. And that happens by being humble, and it happens by changing your mindset of what policing is supposed to be. I think we get there by changing a lot of the things that we've talked about already today. If we can get a lot of the stuff off our plate that police officers were not supposed to take care of in the first place, I think that will help. It helped define their role. And then one of the things we do really good in Fort Worth was community policing. We jumped onto that in the early 90s. We made neighborhood police officers on every beat. They're the problem solver for that community, and they do a great job. But community policing has to be the role of every police officer on the street, not just neighborhood police officers, not just school resource officers, and not just the administrators of the department. Everyone has to play that role, has to take that piece and own it. As far as the community, it's where the community embraces the officers. And you see that in several areas of Fort Worth and several areas across the country. But it's not happening in every community. And that's how you judge success. When the officers are welcomed into every community, when the community members have a problem, they have a cell phone number of an officer they can call to get support. They don't have a fear of calling 911, that when something happens, they know, the community knows 911 will get the police officers there, but there's some trepidation about getting police officers there in some neighborhoods, and success is where that doesn't occur anymore.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Cook, we'll ask you next. And before we move forward, it seems as though the initiative that was being spoken of was MedStar. Are you familiar with MedStar?
I am familiar. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I am familiar with MedStar. It is still in place. In fact, we just recently revised how that board is put together so it would be more representative of the service delivery system that currently exists. Our goal is to keep that model, MedStar, in place for the foreseeable future. So yes, I'm aware of the initiative, and it's a successful initiative, and you don't find it it's not that replicated around the country. And MedStar in this case is operated outside of a local government entity. In most other places that I'm aware of, it's often operated under a local government.
Okay, all right. So thank you for addressing that. So success, your eyes.
So let me start with, so it gets down to this, the word of trust. And the way I would describe that is, I would like any interaction between the community and the police to be described the same way, regardless of the area of the city, regardless of the color of skin, that everybody describes their interaction with police in the same circumstance. They describe it the same way. And they do it in a way that describes that interaction was respectable and done with trust between the two parties. From a citywide standpoint, to me, it's going to be long-term looking at investment in equity and service delivery. And that's going to be our focus for the foreseeable future, to make sure that we deliver services in an equitable way, that we invest in infrastructure and invest in an equitable way. And again, people describe their interaction regardless of the area of the city, regardless of the color of skin. They describe the service that they're getting for the city in the same way.
Thank you for your vision, Mr. Cook. Mr. Stimson, same question to you. What does success look like regarding policing and community relations?
You know, to me, kind of to echo Mr. Cook's sentiments, I think it goes back to reestablishing or establishing the community trust. You know, my time spent on the Race and Culture Task Force has been spoken about quite often this evening. You know, one thing that we consistently heard in our 18 months is that there was a lack of trust between the community and the police department of the city of Fort Worth. And so I think each step that we take, you know, we have to be cognizant of what has happened in the past and where do we go from there. And I think we all have to, you know, have a seat at the table and make sure that we develop a plan to where we're moving together as a city, as a community, and as a county in the right direction. And I think it all just starts with one, let's rebuild the trust. Let's be open, let's be transparent, let's be honest, and let's, you know, continue to move the ball forward. And I think that's what success is to me, and to where, you know, it doesn't matter where you go in Fort Worth or Tarrant County, your interaction with the police officer is going to be the same, and you shouldn't be at fear or feel like you're going to be having a different experience. And I know that's a long-term goal, but that's what success looks like for me.
All right, thanks, Ty. Really appreciate that. Kim, you're up.
Well, I like to say I wrote all the answers for all the panelists, so they pretty much said everything that I wanted to say. I'm just kidding. But I agree with absolutely everyone. I think, and without reiterating everything that they said, I think I would like to see our community, our society, just be more sensitive as it relates to cultures, as it relates to races, as it relates to ethnicities, as it relates to all the protected classes. And so that when we, excuse me, when we walk down the street, that folks don't judge us. I came up in an era when all officers were officer friendlies. We didn't even know their last name. They were all officer friendlies to us. And so I want to get there. I want to get to the point where community feels comfortable with approaching police, whether it's an elder person, whether it's a middle-aged person, whether it's a child or a teenager, and then vice versa. The same thing with police, that police, when they come onto a scene, whether they're called there or they're patrolling an area or they're walking or biking, that they just engage communities, that they engage citizens with no fear, with no concern, with no judgment. And so that I feel is success. And I hope that, you know, with the events of Mr. Floyd's unfortunate death, that I think, and I hope and pray that we all get there fairly soon.
Okay, thank you. Definitely appreciate it. Thank you, everybody, for providing all of your insight. Thank you for providing your time. And definitely thank you for providing your expertise. So this is going to conclude our panelist discussion session. I think everybody got through it fairly well. No cuts, no bruises. So, you know, I think we're good to go. But what I'm going to do, I don't know if many of you guys ever watched Jerry Springer, but, you know, Jerry Springer always left everybody with, you know, just with a last thought. So I know I kind of asked you to define your element of success, and that kind of transitioned into some final thoughts on some of you. But if anyone has any final thoughts that you would like to leave with our Facebook family, please feel free. Now is your opportunity.
I'd like to say that trust was alluded to, but I think trust is something that is earned, and it's earned through personal interaction. You can't earn trust from behind a desk. You can't earn trust from having thoughts and not sitting down and having those conversations. Bringing people together, and especially people that are different from each other, the more we do that, the more we realize we're not different from each other. We are all the same. We have the same desires for our kids to be successful, the same desire, you know, to live in peace and not have to worry about crime, and not have to worry about being handled poorly by a police officer or anyone else in city government. I think the conversations, the interactions are the key to it. Some of the things we've started doing with the last class that graduated in April was bringing people into the police academy that have had negative experiences with the Fort Worth Police Department and letting them tell the recruit classes about those negative experiences. And allowing them to do that shows these brand new officers how their actions can have a completely negative impact on someone, harm that individual's family and friends, and harm our relationship with the community. So I think if we put that in their minds early on, we have a good chance to position them to be more cognizant of their actions out there on the street. We also bring some of those people back to help with the scenario training, to be the role players in the training. So our officers are interacting during the scenarios with people that are similar to the people who are going to meet out on the street. And that's going to better prepare them for their careers. And if they end up failing, we want them to fail in the academy. We don't want them to fail out there on the streets where there's real consequences, not just life and death consequences, but consequences to our relationship with the community. So I think those are some things that we're doing, trying to get put in place. Another thing that we started with that same academy class was, a lot of people have heard about the duty to intervene policy and want their police departments to have that in there. We all saw the Minneapolis video where George Floyd was murdered by the officer and 3 other officers sat around and didn't do anything. But we've had that duty to intervene policy in our general orders for a few years now. With this academy class, we actually created a scenario that the recruits would see an officer using excessive force, and they had to successfully complete that scenario, they had to go in there and intervene and make it stop. So that's something that we're pushing, and we hope that, again, that it shows our officers what we expect of them, and then that will show the community that we are really beholden to them.
Let me add to, I'll go ahead. Oh, go ahead, Ty.
Go ahead, Mr. Cook.
What I was going to add to what Chief Krause was saying is also admitting that we don't have all the answers, right? So we're here at the city of Fort Worth, and I'll admit that we don't have all the answers for all the issues in the neighborhoods of the communities. And that's why that citizen engagement and getting input, sitting down and listening to each other is so important. So I want you to hear from me. We don't have all the answers here. We're going to be better off if we are better at talking with each other, listening to each other, and engaging with each other. And we welcome that here at the City of Fort Worth.
If I could leave the Facebook audience and the Facebook family with one thing, I just want to leave with this. I think, one, I appreciate, having this conversation. And I think it's important for us to continue to have these conversations. But I think we as a community, we have to stay engaged. We can't allow tragic events to bring us out to be engaged in what's going on in our neighborhoods and community. We have to stay engaged 365 days a year. And, it's upon us as a community to make sure that what we want to see happen and what we want to see and how our community operates, that we're engaged and we're a voice. And so I think it's important for us just to make sure that we all continue these conversations, and we're open and we're honest, but we're willing to, to come together. We can all sit at the table and have our different opinions and have our different stance. But at the end of the day, we all need to make sure that we're trying to work towards the goal of moving our communities forward and moving our city forward. And so I just thank you for allowing me to participate in this panel. I've have a good working relationship with everyone involved, and I can look forward to continue to working with everyone as we can move the city forward.
Thank you, Jack.
I'll just close it out and say that to the citizens of Fort Worth, first of all, I'm happy that I am here. I have been welcomed. I've, of course, been thrown a bunch of concerns and issues very fairly, very quickly on, and I've been here maybe 4 months, not even quite 4 months. But I will say, as a person who has been in local government, worked for the local government, federal government, state government, in this whole compliance and ethics field, that continue to hold us as public servants, as your public servants, accountable. We are all accountable for ensuring that we give you the best service that we can, that we're respectful. We are all government servants. And so continue to hold us accountable. Continue to have the dialogues with us. Continue to tell us what you feel your concerns are, what your issues are. Don't ever stop. Just because if the protests stop and things, we get out of this COVID-19 and our numbers get better and everything goes back to normal, which I'm not sure if we even know what the normal is going to be, new normal is going to be anymore. Continue to always engage us. Don't ever let us slip. Don't ever let us become complacent. Continue to engage us, because we are public servants and we should be held to a very high level standard of accountability to all community members of Fort Worth.
I want to thank the entire panel for all of your words of wisdom, for everything that you provided us with here today. There were many talks of transparency. There were talks of the desire to improve, and all of these different elements that everyone wants, right? I think at the end of the day, we all know that there are some bad apples out there on both ends. There are just people in this world that thrive in chaos. And I think that the way that we overcome that is for the individuals that want to see good in the world and that want to see good in people. We have to work together collaboratively. We have to work together collectively. We can't do anything independently, because independently, we're all functioning in silos. And you will never get the macro element done if you're only focused and working in one particular element of it. And so I definitely want to thank everybody for coming out and providing us with all of your insight. I believe this additionally would be benefited if initiatives like Leadership Academy, could be joined with Kappa Alpha Psi's Learn to Live, right? As well as other community-based organizations to meet the overall end state. And so there's a lot of work. This is just the first step. Once again, this was our first webinar, and you just happen to be a part of our inaugural set. So we definitely want to make sure that all of you are aware that the invitation is going to be extended for you to come back out and join us again. And I think without further ado, I have the privilege to announce the closing set to a phenomenal brother of Fort Worth Alumni Chapter of Kappa Alpha Psi, Brother Nate Washington. Nate Washington, he's going to come on and he's going to give some words of wisdom to the Facebook family. I'm going to join him after that, and then we'll formally shut it down. And I would ask that all panelists would hang on until after the Facebook Live post has been cut. Brother Washington, the floor is yours.
Thank you. To our panelists, Chief Krause, Mr. Cook, Ms. Neal, and Mr. Stimson, thank you. To those of you from the community who are watching via Facebook Live, thank you. Your lives matter and your votes count. The issues that bring us here today are often difficult to discuss, but for those of us that have lived the brutality or received the disparate treatment at the hand of police or others involved in the justice system, the issue that brings us here today are not just difficult to talk about, but they're difficult to live. To be clear, the members of the Fort Worth Alumni Chapter of Kappa Alpha Psi do not subscribe to the notion that all police officers are bad, that all prosecutors seek to place us in legal peril for promotion or political gain, or that all judges are unfair. However, as we are clear-eyed, fully conscious men of learning, we do not subscribe to the carefully crafted narrative that all officers are heroes, that the DA is just doing her job, and that the judges don't see race. Speaking for myself only, as a Black man that has lived this issue on all sides, I know that most officers are good and decent. But I also know that the number that is neither good nor decent is not minor. It is not minuscule. I know that the bad apples on the police force do not wear insignia that signifies their devout membership and loyalty to racist ideology. A few years ago, I represented a young man that was arrested for illegally carrying a weapon in his car. I was his second lawyer. His first lawyer was a well-meaning, experienced, middle-aged white lawyer whom I've known for nearly 20 years. He is a really nice guy, and I like him. My client was accused of being a gang member, and under Texas law, that made it illegal for him to carry a weapon in his car. He pleaded with his first lawyer and told him over and over that he was not a gang member. The lawyer, whom I have no reason to believe is racist, could not see it. He encouraged him to take a plea. Eventually, my client's parents scraped together some money. They fired their first lawyer. They hired me. I pleaded with the two ADAs assigned to the case that they were wrong about my client and that the police officer was wrong as well. The lead ADA on the case responded by telling me how right he was and basically disregarded all I had to say. He showed me a picture of a large group of Black men, all wearing red and white, and said, "See, there he is." I said, "Where?" He said, "There." I said, "My guy is not in that picture, and a group of Black men wearing red and white does not make them a gang." He said, "Yes, he is right there," and repeated the plea bargain. He told me to take it or leave it. We left it. We tried the case, and the officer, who probably meant well, walked into the courtroom, pointed at my client, proceeded to tell the jury how he has interacted with my client multiple times, and even knew him from the high school my client graduated from a few years earlier. He went on and on about my client's gang affiliation, and then the ADA showed the picture to the entire courtroom. He asked the officer to point to my client and to the group of Black men wearing red and white. He said, "Point out Big Ken." The officer pointed at one of the Black men and said, "That's him." I took the same picture. I blew it up even larger. Not only was my client not in the picture, he, of course, was not in a gang. The jury returned a 2-word verdict: not guilty. After the trial, the ADA and I went out and drank beer together. I will never forget what he said to me. He said, "Nate, I don't understand why I couldn't see it." I said to him, "You didn't want to see it." That's the problem. Too often, very nice, well-meaning people in leadership roles either don't see the disparate treatment or they are afraid of what will happen if they admit to seeing it. Chief Krause, we can't thank you enough for being here this evening. Everyone I talked to indicated to me that you are a good man and that you have the best interests of your officers and the community at heart. Please know, Chief Krause, we understand you don't manage for just the minority community or for the POA. We know and fully understand that your very difficult job requires you to balance the needs of all involved. That said, Chief Krause, you must clearly understand that balancing the needs of all involved cannot include taxation of Black folks for merely driving. You must understand that the same sort of discretion used to decide you would not file criminal charges against protesters, many of whom were young white women, must also be used in questionable arrests involving young Black men. Chief Krause, Mr. Cook, Ms. Neal, understand that if a small group of bad apples feels comfortable enough and emboldened enough to place nooses and bananas on the desk of Black police officers, what do you think they do to us on the street? What do you think they write in their police reports? What do you think they tell the judges when they seek a warrant? What do you think they tell the DAs as they prep for trial? I can tell you, having been an ADA, having defended people, that racial bias and racial animus shows up. To ADA Stimson, having a son that has battled serious health conditions, I'm not embarrassed to admit that I literally sat at my desk and cried for you and your wife. Thank you for being here. In the courtroom, your courage and professionalism does not go unnoticed. DA Wilson should be proud to have you on her staff. Racial bias is the reason George Floyd died before our very eyes last month. Racial bias is the reason Tamir Rice never saw his 13th birthday. Racial bias in the ranks of the Fort Worth Police Department is the reason Jacqueline Craig was thrown to the ground. And racial bias in the ranks of the Fort Worth Police Department is the reason David Colley will never walk again. Racial bias in the ranks of the Fort Worth Police Department is the reason a Black man was punched in the face in a hospital lobby. And racial bias in the ranks of the Fort Worth Police Department is the reason a Black man holding a barbecue fork gets shot with a shotgun blast. Racial bias in the ranks of the Fort Worth Police Department is what allowed a Black man to be handcuffed to a squad car and beat with a nightstick. And racial bias is the reason Atiana Jefferson was committed to an early grave. Chief Krause, Ms. Cook, Mr. Cook, and Ms. Neal, people of all races are telling you enough is enough. They're telling you Black skin is neither per se suspicious nor per se violent. You must enact change. To paraphrase the eloquent and thoughtful Mayor Betsy Price as she spoke in one of our churches, we don't want this moment, this session here tonight, or others to just become a female dog session. We understand and believe that most officers are good people doing a difficult job. But we also know that some officers bring not just racial bias, but racism to the job. Mr. Cook, we challenge you to budget adequate resources to recruit officers from each of the historically Black colleges and universities in Texas over each of the next 5 years. We challenge you to develop a Citizens Oversight Review Board. We challenge you to inform the POA that if we work together to remove bad officers from their ranks, distrust from the community is reduced and it benefits the POA. To the community and brothers watching via Facebook, our dear brother Ralph David Abernathy said, as he was marching with Dr. King and got arrested over 40 times, and he was on the balcony that fateful night when Dr. King was assassinated. He told us, a voteless people is a hopeless people. So I'm telling you to go vote. In the midterm elections, go vote. In the primaries, go vote. If it is raining, go vote. During those election cycles that occur in May, go vote. If leadership of one political party or the other decides they're going to try to make it difficult for you, still meet the challenge and go vote. Over 900,000 people live in the city of Fort Worth. More than 150,000 of those people are African American. Less than 40,000 people voted in the last mayoral race. If you don't want a mayor that stands in a church and curses at your pastor, then go vote. If you don't want a city council that's afraid of the POA, then go vote. If you don't want a judge turned elected district attorney that tells jurors they're stupid when they return a not guilty verdict, or that develops policies that prevents defense lawyers from presenting exculpatory evidence to grand jurors, then go vote. If you don't want to see a Black woman go to prison for 5 years for voting when an officer punches a man in the face, lies about it, and only gets 2 years, go vote. When Black people are disproportionately stopped for driving, investigated for being suspicious, and prosecuted under circumstances when others would not be, it is a tax on our community. It takes resources out of our homes, it limits our job prospects, and it brings the weight of the government to bear on our families. It creates a problem that endures for generations. It is circular. Whether you recognize it or not, whether you are part of the problem or not, it is a form of systemic racism that impacts our communities. Again, thank you to Chief Krause, City Manager David Cook, Ms. Neal, and ADA Stimson. Your willingness to be here on a Saturday evening speaks volumes. However, what you do on Monday morning makes a difference. Thank you.
Thank you, Brother Washington. That was definitely a phenomenal message that you just provided. Definitely see that it was genuine, and I definitely see that you're doing your part to basically divide the gap and to allow good to prevail over evil. Thank you. I appreciate that. So that ends our discussion. We thank everyone for being a part of this history and Fort Worth alumni for allowing this first session of Kappa Conversations to be a complete success. I think there's a lot of information that's going to be digested, a lot of information that's going to be processed, but we have to ensure that we have follow-up. Follow-up is a very key component of success. And so to all of the panelists that we have here, if anyone has information that you would like to pass out to the community, now is the time. Facebook pages, Instagram pages, emails, anything that you would like to, the people to reach out to you regarding, please feel free to do it now.
This is Kim. I'd just like to say, give our email address to any community member that has any concerns or just wants to touch base with me or have a meeting with me. It's a pretty simple email address. It's policeoversight@fortworthtexas.com. I'm sorry, .gov. Police oversight, one word, at Fort Worth, Texas, one word, .gov.
Okay. All right. Well, once again, thank you all. Please continue to follow the Fort Worth Alumni Kappas on Facebook and on Instagram. Fort Worth Kappas. Is that what it is? Let me make sure I'm giving that out right. That is going to be, yes, Fort Worth Kappas, Instagram and Facebook. And once again, my name I have been Rashad Raynar, and I am the voice of DFW. Feel free to follow me on Instagram, the voice of DFW. And until next time, we will see you online. Thank you for joining us. Have a great night.